What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Big Ten college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Colin Wilson. Ready to talk some Big Ten, which should be the Big 14, and the next year should be the Big 16. What's going on, Colin?
Are we sure? I mean, I loved your tweet about how, we have the Pac-9, we have the Big 16, we got 11, we got odd numbers all over the place with Colorado making their departure. I think the big news for this conference is that Oregon and Washington are interested in joining. The Big Ten kind of wants them, but they don't really want to be a part of who killed the Pac-12. So that's going to be a weird fit. I still think USC, UCLA, which is all the talk around college football, joining is a big deal, but that doesn't apply to this season. I think we should enjoy this season. We still have our divisions. We don't know what they're going to do with them after this year. But I think there are definitely betting opportunities in this version of the Big Ten. I can't wait to see if they're done expanding after we get done with this season.
Yeah, it's interesting in that it is. We just did. If you haven't listened, by the way, check out our Colin and I recorded. If you're listening to this now, our ACC and Pac-12 are out, and we're also going through the group of 5. Colin or I will be on with Mike and Mike, so check those episodes out. Well, but we just did the ACC and the Pac-12, and one of the things I loved about those, breaking down those conferences, is they got rid of divisions. That's not the case this year with the Big Ten. It will be next year. Divisions will go away once they add those 2 teams from the West Coast, and who knows who else. And they will have, but it's still the East and the West this year. I hate it. I'm going to enjoy the last year of it, but it's just so unfair to some of the teams. I mean, if you look at the futures odds, I have Maryland and Wisconsin. I think you do too. Like power rated pretty similarly, right?
Yeah.
And like Maryland is 60-1 to win the Big Ten, and Wisconsin 60-1 to win the national title. Or they're also 5-1 to win the Big Ten. That's just the discrepancy in the divisions. So let's start in the East, the ultra competitive East, which Michigan has won in back-to-back years. Michigan at BetMGM, as always, shop around, but all the numbers I'm going to reference here are at BetMGM, the official sponsor of the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Michigan and Ohio State are both priced at plus 180 to win the Big Ten. Penn State plus 550. I think you can find a 6-1 out there. As far as win totals are concerned, Michigan over 10.5 minus 120. Ohio State over 10.5 minus 105. Penn State a little lower at over half minus 145. The interesting thing here is that Michigan will host Ohio State, which is why they are going to, should get a little an edge on 2 teams that are, most people are going to have rated pretty similarly. When I look at all 3 of these teams, we'll group them together, and then we'll get to the rest of the East. And for what it's worth, Penn State will host Michigan and go to Ohio State. There's a really good chance that this ends in a 3-way tie.
Yep.
And
exactly.
if it does, so and I think that's actually going to happen. I think Penn State's going to beat Michigan at home. Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. Ohio State's going to beat Penn State at home. If that does, and they don't lose any other games, it would go down to the 5th tiebreaker, which is non-division opponents and their records. And Penn State could actually be the odd man out because they play Northwestern, and Michigan and Ohio State don't. So Penn State, you would look at their opponents from the West. Michigan and Ohio State, both Purdue and Minnesota. The difference is Michigan plays Nebraska, Ohio State plays Wisconsin. So Ohio State's actually in better position than Michigan aspect, because you assume that Wisconsin's going to finish with a better record than Nebraska, and that's the only difference. Penn State has a drastically different opponent group. They have Iowa, who could win a number of games. They have Illinois. So those are decent. And then you have Northwestern, who could just have a disastrous year. And then if that was the case, most likely Ohio State would go. So if you're looking at futures, keep that in mind if that's how it plays out and everyone holds serve at home. But before we get into all of that, when I look at these teams, pretty similar when I look at them, is in that Michigan's defense. Look, they lost some guys in the defensive line. I do have questions about one corner spot, but the defense should be really good. Their offensive line is going to be great. Their running game is going to be elite. Do have some I still have some questions on McCarthy. The receivers are good, but not, leaves something to be desired for a team that wants to win a national title. Ohio State, I also have confidence in that defense this year. Mainly Jim Knowles' bump, right? Year 2 of his scheme. Do have some questions in the secondary, but I do trust their defense. But while their skill positions are fine, unlike I'm not worried about their receivers. I have the best receivers in the country. Do have a little bit of questions about their O-line and quarterback. Right? They're definitely going to step back at the quarterback position. Penn State, I know they lost Joey Porter Jr. at corner, so one question at corner, but I really like their defense this year. Again, all 3 of these defensive coordinators I trust units. And then you have Drew Aller. Offensive line, some questions, and then the wide receiver room, we're going to see. They got to prove it. Great running back room. So they all have similar questions for me on offense, and I trust their defenses. So what it comes down to me is that when I look at it from a futures perspective, Michigan, Ohio State might come down to the last game for the win total. I have them priced similarly. I don't really see any value on either team. But Penn State, I don't want to take them to win the Big Ten because they might lose out on this tiebreaker.
Do you and I have the same futures? I have a futures. I know
what is your futures bet?
I got to hear what you have to say. I don't know if I should jump in. And
Hold on, I want to see if you can pick up where I'm going.
I know I've already made the bet. I can't wait to see if you got the same thing. We haven't compared notes.
No, not at all. Well, I haven't made a bet yet, so I was going to get your opinion on this. But my thoughts on Penn State is I really trust the defense, and if Drew Aller hits and lives up to his potential, you could talk Heisman for him and or Penn State playoff national title futures. I think that's the play other than going in the Big Ten, because there also is a path where Penn State doesn't make the Big Ten title game and still gets in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
We saw that last year happen with 2 Big Ten teams. So, and I think I want that high variance with a quarterback as talented as Aller, still has to prove it. And there's the chance that Penn State, has the same record as Ohio State. Michigan doesn't get in the Big Ten title game, but still gets in the college football playoff, which they have not done yet. But this is the last chance they'll have before it expands. So I have similar questions with all these teams. I'm looking at Penn State futures in one of those 2 realms with you.
I mean, listen, podcast nation, Sagi and I have not talked. We have not compared notes, and I have been very, very mum on what my future is going to be here. I've said it on 2 other content places outside of Action what I'm going to buy, and I've maybe told 3 people in my inner circle what I'm buying, and I've actually laid a dime, and I'm going to lay more dimes if I can buy a better number. So let's
drum roll, because I really have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, you're going down the same thinking path, the same ideology that I had. And let me go through Michigan first, because I'm looking for cracks between the 3, right? Obviously, if I can find an avenue for a crack, that's going to discount them in the futures market. Okay. So when I start with Michigan, Blake Corum is coming back from running back. The offense is going to be called by Sharon Moore. It's not a situation. He's the one that's going to call it. So you can expect more 11 inside zone, gap schemes, lots of running from, he's the offensive line coach. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I have nothing negative to say about Jesse Minter. He has been able to pick up Mike McDonald, this whole defensive shift that they've had into the 4-2-5, the cover 1, cover 3, heavy blitz, heavy success rate in creating pressure. You're right. There are some new faces here, but defensive tackle Chris Jenkins is still, linebacker Junior Colson is there. And then you get to Harbaugh, who's going to be suspended for 4 games.
By the way, one major crack of Michigan, if Will Johnson goes down, their cornerback, they can't afford that. Their cornerback room would then get very shaky. And yes, I'll keep going. Bodog Jim might be suspended. I don't know if it's been announced. 4 games. Cheaters, don't associate with them.
Yeah.
Don't talk to them. Don't associate with them. But yeah, sorry.
Bodog Jim getting caught cheating. Wow. That's a statement. So, I go down this path with him, and where are the wrinkles at? Okay. Well, first off, Sharon Moore is completely in charge of the offense. That's a change. I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm saying it's a change. Jim Harbaugh not being there to me, is 2018 Ohio State all over again. We docked the Buckeyes 2 points back in 2018 because of Urban Meyer being suspended for the first 3 games. It didn't come into play in their first 2 games, those 2 points of power rating, but it came into play in game 3 against TCU. TCU covered that game by 0.5 point, 1 point, whatever number you got. And that's how narrow it is. Now, Jim Harbaugh doesn't call plays on either side of the ball. He hasn't in a while. He may make a decision on 4th downs. He is really trusted as coordinator. So I don't think it's that big of a drop. You know, the offensive line is being supplied by Stanford. Some portal players are coming in to fill in that offensive line. Great West draw, Purdue, Mini, Nebraska. I don't have a lot. I think the one negative thing I could say about Michigan is we've seen their ceiling. They can't win the national title. They can make the college football playoff when Ohio State stumbles, and I think that's the best that they can do. I think we've seen the best versions of Michigan. You go to Ohio State,
and I think that I agree. I think that's the I just don't trust the upside. Like we've seen the upside of McCarthy and the passing game. It's not the best wide receiver room in the world. And I actually might bump Michigan with Harbaugh out because he hates gamblers. I'm just kidding. Pick ahead.
And then you move over to Ohio State, and Ohio State's stumbling is what has propelled Michigan up to be a college football playoff team, because forever it was impossible to get to this point. Now we have a new quarterback coming in. Could be some change there. I mean, remember, we're looking for faults, cracks in the foundation to where maybe this team won't make the college football playoff or win the Big Ten. You get 65% of your tackles and PBUs are coming back. You're going to have to replace some of those. Linebacker Tommy Eichenberg is still there. On offense, you're just as loaded as anyone. You're still one of the best wide receiver rooms in the nation. Travion Henderson is still there. Is Jim Knowles? I think the big question there is Jim Knowles going to run cover 0 against teams that are run and play action pass, right? I mean, he burned all of us Buckeye backers so bad last year by not switching out and letting Cornelius Johnson just go down the field for 6 touchdowns. So, I have questions at the quarterback position. They do play Notre Dame.
line isn't just completely set in stone as it has been with Ohio State too. So there's some questions to tackle for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Day is not a part of the offense. Like Brian Hartline is now calling the whole offense. Does that help? Does that hurt? Like I said, I'm looking for cracks. I'm looking for wrinkles. And Ohio State's got a lot. All right. There's a lot for me to question here. And the secondary, by the way, not projected to be a top 3 secondary in the Big Ten. So if you're still going to give up explosives, if play action pass is still burning you and you're running cover 0, could still be a problem. Now we get to the team that I can't stop thinking about. And again, I can't stop buying Bowman University Chrome cards of autographed Drew Aller. Drew Aller's huge. We didn't, I kind of discount freshman seasons, especially when your offensive coordinator is Mike Yurcich. When Mike Yurcich took over at Penn State, we saw an immediate impact on Sean Clifford. We saw less turnover-worthy plays. We saw more big-time throws. We saw adjusted accuracies go up in pressured pockets. The decision-making was just better. Now, I think the jump for Aller, we're not going to know. We don't really know what his ceiling is, nor do we know what the ceiling is on this Penn State team. This is, and I'd put money on it right now, and I don't know how we grade it. This is the best defense in college football by far. I think this team raced out to 100 PBUs last year, like by game 7. That's not going to change. You got, Kalen King at cornerback, Abdul Carter, Curtis Jackson, and the linebackers both play excellent pass coverage. And then when you go to the offensive side of the ball, I saw Nick Singleton in the Rose Bowl. And I mean, he's just, he's unbelievable in space. You want to talk about creating yards after contact. So, and you also have one of the best offensive tackles.
Should have much better offensive line injury luck too. And you have one of the best potential top 5 pick at left tackle.
Yeah, Olu Fashanu, one of the best offensive tackles in college football, maybe the best. And then you go to the one area where, Manny Diaz is a great coordinator. He's not a head coach. He is a great coordinator. And he runs multiple packages, cover 3, high blitz. The coordinators are great. The talent on defense is the best in the nation. The only question mark is Drew Aller. And I worried about that, everybody beating themselves. And I'm glad that you did a scheduled deep dive because it doesn't favor Penn State. But my bet that I've already thrown money on is Penn State to make the college football playoff at plus 440. Don't ask me how I hedge it because I don't know. But all I know is they've got to win one when it comes to Michigan and Ohio State. And one of them they get at home and one of them they go on the road. And they always play Ohio State extremely tight. These games are extremely tight. And here's the deal. If I don't make the college football playoff with this bet on Penn State because of James Franklin, fine. I lost because of the head coach. maybe there's a fourth down decision that screws us. I don't know. But based on talent and stability and the fact that defense wins ball games in this conference, I don't want the Big Ten number. It's not good enough. It's depressed. It's not a good number for Penn State. But to make the playoff at plus 440, it's out there. Go get it. And if I can find a better number, which I've been on the search for, I'm going to take it again because I love this team. And I think there is a book out there offering exact wins. And I've played a little bit of Penn State at 11. That might not be available to everybody, but I see this as an 11-1 team. I see them right there in the 4th, 5th, 6th slot in the very last college football playoff ranking. And I think that this future's got legs.
Yep, love it. I'm going a step further. I'm going to take the best number out there. Do some line shopping. I'm waiting on some of these for when the podcasts come out.
Doing national title or
national title. I'll dabble some playoff too with you. But I'm also going to dabble some playoff because my thinking is that if they win the Big Ten outright, then obviously they probably had to beat Ohio State and Michigan, or Ohio State, Michigan slept up elsewhere. That means like Al really exceeded expectations, and this offense is firing. Like I do have like they're going to move some pieces around in the offensive line, and then the wide receiver, I want someone to just emerge as the guy. But if win the Big Ten or they get to the college football playoff, that means Aller exceeded or lived up to his lofty expectations, and that's really all they need with this defense. And that means, to me, with the landscape of college football this year, that they're fully capable of winning the national title. And I would love to have a 25, 30 to 1 in my pocket.
Something else
about out there.
Something else about Drew Aller. When I mentioned Mike Yurcich cleaning up Sean Clifford, Drew Aller had 71 dropbacks last year, no interceptions, no turnover-worthy plays in those 71 dropbacks. I can get behind this all day.
Yeah, you have a great game for them to rely on. The offensive line gets a couple guys back from injury. You did lose a good center, but they're gonna slide their guard in there. So they had some bad injury luck on the offline last year. You hope that improves, and it comes down to I think Penn State is finally back, right? It's like that 10 years of kind of purgatory and fighting to get back to where they are. I'll tell you one thing, my dad is going to be very happy to listen. He listens to all of our podcasts, and I've never given Penn State this much love on a national stage or a future until this year. So I'll finally be rooting for him. I used to root against all his teams. That's why I was a Ravens fan. I used to hate Duke basketball, Penn State football, and the Eagles. I used to bet against them. It was my biggest I totally watched my highest ROI. So I bet him when I was growing up, when I was a kid, 10, 11, I would bet $20 that Duke's going to lose, that the Eagles going to lose, that Penn State's going to lose. Horrible picks by me because they were all good in the 90s. But when they lost, I would get my bucks. When they won, I don't have any money. So like I can't. Those were the days. But all right, we're on the stage with Penn State. You agree, win totals from Ohio State about right? I don't
yeah, the numbers are right. 10.9, 10, like they're right there. Juiced properly.
Yeah. If I had to guess, probably comes out of that last game, which is probably going to be close to, within a field goal.
Hopefully it's meaningless because our Penn States are advancing into the Big Ten championship. Hopefully that's a meaningless game other than win total.
Yeah. You also, if you want to be with a Penn State future, you also could have where it gets really interesting is if that scenario plays out where Ohio State goes in the tiebreaker, which would be the most likely case based on where these teams are projected right now, if they all finish with one loss in conference. But what if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame?
Yeah.
It wouldn't impact the Big Ten standings. So then Ohio State goes to the Big Ten championship, wins the Big Ten. They would have 2 losses as Big Ten champion, but Penn State would only have 1 loss. Then it gets really interesting.
Because Ohio State, as a 2-loss champion, got bypassed by Alabama as an at-large previously. So,
yep. Okay. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting. Maybe we'll get some complete chaos with these Big Ten divisional tiebreakers in their last year, which would be very fitting. But let's talk the rest of the Big Ten East. We have Maryland. I'm going to list the odds to win the Big Ten. Maryland 60 to 1, Michigan State 150 to 1, Rutgers 200 to 1, Indiana 250 to 1. We'll start with Maryland at 60 to 1. I've heard a lot of people are really high on this team. They bring back a quarterback. By the way, in this conference, are my notes right? The only returning quarterbacks out of 14 teams are Rutgers, Michigan, and Maryland.
This is the most
I think that's it.
Quarterback. Yeah. Maryland has the most experienced quarterback in the conference, I think.
Yeah, 3 out of 14. For what it's worth, there's 4 new head coaches: Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and Wisconsin, all in the West. 7 new offensive coordinators, 5 new defensive coordinators, 11 new quarterbacks. And there's only one team that has the same head coach, offense coordinator, defense coordinator, quarterback. That's Michigan. That's what they have going for them. A lot of new quarterbacks and then some rebuilding in the West. We're going to stay in the East with Maryland. They have an experienced, talented quarterback. They second-year DC, but they lost a lot on, in the trenches. They always will have talented wide receivers, but they did lose a lot at receiver. Can they win? I should mention their win total over 7.5 plus 120. Can they win a game against a ranked team? Can they beat a good team? They're 3-22 versus Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan in the Big Ten. I have questions in the trenches. It's Josh Gaddis. Do we really trust him? They also lost their star kicker, which could be important in close games. They do have an easy non-conference schedule to kind of build some momentum with Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, then at Michigan State, then home against Indiana. Probably be 5-0 before going to Ohio State. They do avoid Wisconsin and Iowa out of the West as well. So there's a lot of things to like about the Terps. What are your thoughts there? Any value here either way on their win total or taking a shot?
There is an over 7 minus 130 out there. I would tell everybody that is the play. I have partaken in that myself. This is one of the best quarterbacks, at least from an experience perspective and an explosive passing perspective. And Talia Tagovailoa, his wide receiver, Deshaun Jones. They're going to have a very explosive offense for the quarterback and wide receiver position. I'm scared of the offensive line. They return 50% of their snaps on the offensive line. The defense loses 60% of their pressures. Not that it was that great anyways. They only had 120th in pass rush last year. But then you go and you look at the schedule, like you mentioned, Stuck. And if you look at who they play from the West, Illinois, at Nebraska, we'll get to that. I'm not scared of that game. At Northwestern, we'll talk about them. That's not a tough pull from the West. You didn't get Iowa. You didn't get Wisconsin, right? And then when you look at the non-conference, Towson, Charlotte, the Fighting Biff Bogies, I can't wait to get to that. And then Virginia. I mean, this is a pretty soft schedule where the biggest problem with Maryland is their havoc allowed. They finished 93rd in havoc allowed, and then they lose half their offensive line snaps. So Tagovailoa is going to be running for his life, shooting guys 30, 40 yards down the field, more explosive plays with whatever system Gaddis is trying to create, speed and space or whatever the hell it is. So I have confidence that they can outscore the non-blue blood names on this roster. Look at the Big Ten travel schedule outside of Ohio State. Michigan State, not a problem. Nebraska, not a problem. Northwestern, Rutgers, not scared of any of this. So I'm going over 7. I would rather have the 7, not that 7.5. I would pay the juice. And because I project this like 8.2. So over Maryland for me.
Yeah. The one thing that I am worried about with my Penn State future, and maybe this is the year Maryland can finally pull off one of these upsets of a ranked team in the Big Ten, is the spot for Penn State. And if you're a Michigan fan or have a Michigan future, you're probably worried about that too. Another thing that kind of favors Ohio State is Ohio State, they host Maryland and they have a bye the week before, and then it's Purdue the week after. Michigan, they go to Maryland in between Penn State and Ohio State, like trappy, sandwichy, whatever term you want to use. And then Penn State goes to Maryland the week before they play Michigan. So Maryland gets to host both of those teams. Like I mentioned, they also avoid Wisconsin and Iowa. They really should start 5-0 and build a lot of momentum here. I'm afraid to back Lynn and Gaddis.
You're essentially saying the road to the Big Ten championship runs through College Park. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
It does. So I'm sure Maryland will beat the whole game and throw a pick 6 and not cover at the end with a chance to win. No, I'm not still bitter about that. It's Penn State. All right. Let's talk about the dregs of the East before we move into the West. Michigan State 150 to 1. They lost the lottery. They play at Minnesota, at Iowa, and they get Nebraska at home from the West. They're also at Indiana and at Rutgers. Like, that's horrendous. Like, those are the two worst teams in the East, and you got to go on the road for both. Michigan State, I mean, they lost it. Their defense, I mean, it can't get any worse, but they lost some talented pieces. You hope they get some better injury luck. But they lost their, one receiver to the NFL. They lose their quarterback and their top receiver after spring. It's a three-way competition. It's a mess. And based on their Mel Tucker's history, he's not going to name a starter until like a minute before kick. If you go back to 2019, 2020, Michigan State's a mess. Indiana, I mean, they are also a mess. They bring back, I mean, almost nothing. This is a complete rebuild. I don't know where do you have them in as far as returning production? Got to be way down there.
Yeah, 35% on offense, 57% on defense. So it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, they lost their two best linebackers, although they were hurt last year, but they lost their top four, corners on the depth chart. It's the offensive line finally has some experience, and you hope the quarterback play gets better. And again, another competition here. Bottom 10 in returning experience.
Yep.
So they're a mess too. Indiana over 3.5 minus 130 for what it's worth. And then you have Rutgers. They lost the schedule lottery as well, along with Michigan State. Not only is Rutgers in the brutal East, they drew Iowa and Wisconsin from the West, both away. And they also get Wisconsin and Michigan State off of byes. It's just, I mean, and their bye week is before Ohio State. I mean, how much is that really going to help you? It's a really tough schedule. I'm going to focus just on Rutgers. I like the over. It's over 4.5 minus 105. There's a new offensive coordinator in town. It's like, can the O help the D out at all? Because I think the D is going to be pretty solid across the board. D will be even more solid if they can ever get any help. So, but I look at the schedule, it's like, all right, Northwestern, who's a mess, they really benefit from that. They also benefit from the mess of Michigan State. But Northwestern, Temple, and Va Tech at home to start. At Michigan's a loss. Then they're home against Wagner. I mean, that's really, really good shot to start 4-1. And then you just need one more win. It's like you host Michigan State, you go to Indiana. We just talked about how much of a mess those teams are. You also host Maryland in the finale because the schedule after Indiana gets really tough with Ohio State, at Iowa, at Penn State. So, I like the OC hire. I think the offense will be a little bit better and more competent. They do have a returning quarterback, which most of these teams in the Big Ten don't. I expect a little step forward from Winsat. The offensive line, I think with a new offensive line coach, could be improved. I am worried about, losing their punter, our guy, which is like such a weapon for them.
Yeah.
But if their offense is a little better, it's not going to be as important. And I think it'll help the defense out, which is solid and deep. And I think Rutgers is sneaky to get to at least 5 wins. I show value in their win total over, but let me get your thoughts on the dregs of the East between Rutgers, Indiana, and Michigan State.
Rutgers, I had projected at 3.5 as a win total, so I can't really say I'm going under because I do like the direction that they're heading. They've already named Gavin Wimsatt as the starter. Kirk Soraka has been hired as offensive coordinator, and he's a great quarterback coach. The one hesitation I have there is Greg Schiano fired him in 2010 off his own staff, so that's kind of interesting. But it's a complete reset of the offensive coaching staff. The defense is going to be fine under Schiano, top 25 in tackling and passing downs defense. They don't like to allow a lot of explosives. It's a manageable schedule. They were terrible on offensively in third downs. If they get any kind of regression to the mean of mid-tier bad teams in Big Ten, then they're going to be able to win a few games that they shouldn't. So I'll let you run with that one. The one that I'm on is the under on Michigan State. I don't know what happened to Mel Tucker after he signed that huge contract, because there's just not a lot of positivities that have happened since then.
By the way, before you keep going, this won't happen with a lot of our previews, but we start off on the same page with Penn State. And again, we don't share notes because we before any of this or talk about any of this because we just find it more interesting for the audience and for the podcast. But we have our 3 and out, which we're going to do at the end of every conference preview, which is our, a future week one take, an over and an under. On the same page with Penn State. I just, hinted one of the overs I like with Rutgers. My under is Michigan State. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'll help you fill out those bullet points. I mean, Peyton Thorne departing after the spring game. Was he really told after the spring game, you're not going to be the starter, or was he poached by Hugh Freeze at Auburn? We don't know. But what I do know is that Noah Kim's got 14 passing attempts. I mean, they're bringing back 6% experience there. 42% of your offensive lines. That's a mess. On defensive side, where Scotty Hazelton is supposed to be fantastic as a defensive coordinator, fell to 122nd in coverage grading. Iowa's going to beat them. They have Iowa from the West, going to beat them. At the time they play Nebraska come November, Nebraska may be ready to start winning some games in the new system that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But, I can't control the line of scrimmage on offense, 104th in line yards. You don't have your offensive line. And on defense, you can't stop explosive plays and you can't stop people from passing on you. And that's a really bad combination in this division. So I'm going to go under. There's a minus 165 on 5.5. I would rather do under 5. Also, I know everybody, one of my first game of the years and articles I wrote months ago was Washington, I believe -6 or -7 I bought going to Michigan State. That number is ballooned out to 12. I would not be surprised to see that creep up to 14. So if you're still interested in that, I don't think there's a lot of value, but there's still a little bit of value on Washington up till about 13.5 in that game of the year against Michigan State. Because when I think Michael Penix and Roma Duns and going to Michigan State against this secondary, all I can see is the Huskies up by 40 at halftime. So keep that in mind, but that's definitely my under for the podcast.
Yeah, I completely agree with the under. If you want to play devil's advocate, you would say that the offensive line, which has been a disaster, they're bringing a lot of experience back. I think all 5 that started in the finale. You hope that it gets better. Also, you hope that the turnover luck and injury luck on the defensive side gets better. But I mean, the defense was such a disaster, and you lose your top 2 defensive backs from last year, one to the NFL. But it's hard to imagine they get worse. But yeah, I completely agree with you. This is a mess. I just don't believe in what the direction that this program is going in any longer. And the transfers out after spring really speak to that. And they have arguably one of the 5 hardest schedules in the country. They're at Mini and at Iowa, and then get Nebraska out of the West. That's tough. Also, Washington non-conference, and then as always, you get Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and then as you mentioned, you get Nebraska later in the year, which is a rebuild. You're also at Indiana later in the year, sandwiched between Ohio State and Penn State. Indiana's a complete rebuild. And that's later in the year in a bad spot and a game that you were like, oh, Indiana should be one of our wins. That's tough as well. You're at Rutgers in between Iowa and Michigan. So there's some tough spots on the schedule and where they're playing the teams. And I just don't believe in anything that is going on here. So yeah, I agree. I like under 5.5. Don't mind the under 5 play as well on Michigan State. Indiana is a complete mess, but I think just to quickly touch on them, we'll see the Walt Bell Air Raid what it can do, but there's a lot of transfers coming in to try and I think 16 to try and plug some of these holes on defense. So we'll see if Indiana can surprise. I'm not betting under 3.5. I mean, look, they have, and by the way, Michigan State only 3 home games in the Big Ten because they play. Who do they play? They play someone in Wrigley. They play Penn State and Detroit. So that's not on campus. They only have 3 true Big Ten home games.
Brutal.
But Indiana, I mean, they do have Indiana State at home, Akron at home. So that should be your floor of 2 wins. And then, you have Rutgers at home, Michigan State at home. And then maybe they steal one if they're a little bad, at Purdue in the finale. So there's chances for Indiana to get to 4 wins, even if they have a really poor year. I think the number's right there. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. I'm at 3.2. And the reason I'm taking the under 3.5 that's juiced at plus 125 is that Michigan State game is in such a bad spot for the Spartans on November 18th, right? I mean, that is such a trap game that Indiana can steal, and that could be the one that decides it. And I'm not trying to sit around on the weekend before Thanksgiving hoping Michigan State wins a game, hoping, they may be sitting around at 2 or 3 wins, hoping that they win the game to keep this going under. Indiana's going to go with Walt Bell. I have not seen Walt Bell take over an offense at Florida State or UMass or any of his stops where the offense has improved, where he left it in a better spot. Chad Wiltz over on defense going to run the 3-3-5 that Tom Allen wants, but there's not a lot of positives to take out of here. Even the quarterback battle, Tavion Jackson, Brendan Sorsby. I mean, it doesn't matter. How are we at value above replacement level? We're not very, very, it's a tough roster to try to back in this division. So I'm going to lay off the under because of that spot against Michigan State.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the West, where Wisconsin is the preseason favorite at plus 550 to win the Big Ten. I think to win the division. We pull up the division, the latest division odds at BetMGM. They are plus 110 to win the West. Then you have Iowa, who's 10-1 to win the Big Ten. Minnesota, 30-1. Illinois, 50-1. Nebraska, 60-1. Purdue, 100-1. And Ravel's beloved Northwestern Wildcats, 250-1. This division is a mess. I mean, there are 4 new head coaches. There are, I believe, 7 new quarterbacks. Every team has a new quarterback in this division. Let me double check my math. Yeah, every team has a new quarterback in the division. There are scheme changes across the board. There are gambling investigations in the state of Iowa. There are hazing firings at Northwestern. There are like some complete rebuilds. Wisconsin's going to run an air raid. Like Iowa needs to average 25 points per game for nepotism. And
we got
what is going on in the West?
We got contracts on Brian Ferentz scoring certain points per game, even though his defense may cash that in for him.
By the way, he's got to hope that what conspiracy theory Ferentz frames the Iowa punter for a gambling investigation so that they can't pin Team Steve. Although that's how Iowa scores a lot with like safeties. Maybe that's how they get the 25 points per game. But also Fleck is like under fire for hazing people. I know everyone gets canceled for everything, but like we're going back to 2018 and finding out that Fleck punished his team with exercise. Like the people complaining about this, tell me you've never played sports without telling me you've never played sports. Like that's what you do. We play football. You go run hills. Like that's okay. We don't have to.
I ran. You played football. I played football. I ran. You ran when you got in trouble. Like if your kicker missed a field goal, you had to run for an extra 30 minutes. You ran.
That's what you do. It also helps you get in shape. It's like not just a purely punitive thing. It's crazy. But anyway, so this conference is just, this division is a complete just mess. Let's start high level. Anything from a futures perspective to win the division, any value for the conference? Like, is it worth taking a shot with any of these teams? Because there's just so much chaos. Like, say Wisconsin, this identity change, right?
Yeah.
I like what they're doing. I like the hire, but it's a lot of change. It's a completely new offense. And, you're bringing in a quarterback and a scheme that's just a complete 180 from what Wisconsin's been doing. There's most likely going to be some growing pains. And this is a complete identity shift for a team. Iowa, should have a great defense again. The special teams could be really special once again. McCarthy comes in at quarterback. We'll see if he can give the offense some juice finally. The offensive line, I will say, for Iowa should be better. That's usually a strength there. Was a weakness last year, but they were so young. And that's one of the things you can usually count on Kirk Ferentz to have great special teams and develop offensive linemen. So that unit should improve, which should help the offense. And I think McCarthy definitely is an upgrade at quarterback. Illinois had a great year last year, but that defense should take a step back. You lose 4 guys now that are on NFL rosters from that secondary. So we'll see if that, I think their defense will take a step back. Their offense might take a step up with Altmaier quarterback. Minnesota, meanwhile, new quarterback, the Greek gunslinger. They have a lot to replace. I'm worried about their secondary as well, and they're not able to generate pressure. And if they can't, with some of their secondary losses, That could be problematic. Nebraska, complete rebuild, identity shift. With Rule coming in, he's a turnaround artist, but what has he done in the first year of his previous stops? It's like 1 win, 2 win. It's all about the culture change. But look, it's a wide open division. Northwestern, a mess, complete disaster, quarterback battle. I mean, the hazing, Fitzgerald gone. They're going to be really bad. And then Purdue, another coaching change, scheme change, like just
coach. Yeah.
Yeah, defensive quarter head coach. And by the way, Illinois might miss Walters as well, who goes to Purdue as the head coach. And Purdue obviously loses 2 of their key pass catchers to the NFL. So make some sense of the Big Ten West.
Well, when you have the talent that Wisconsin has, you pencil them in to represent the West in the Big Ten championship game. My heartburn comes with a unit of offensive linemen that were hired, that were recruited to run one kind of offense, which is plow massive holes for Braylon Allen. And now they're going to be asked to swap in 60 to 70% rush rate for about a 49% rush rate and learn how to pass block. So in case you have been living under a rock, Phil Longo has left North Carolina and he's come to Wisconsin. If you know anything about Ole Miss and North Carolina, Phil Longo offenses, he likes to run fast. Last year, Wisconsin, 121st in tempo. Longo has averaged between 10th and 25th fastest in the nation when running his. I mean, there are years he's been top 5. And so my question comes, how much gas do these guys have in the first part of their schedule? Are the pass blocking schemes an update to something that they weren't recruited for and have never done before? I still expect them in the run game to absolutely plow through everybody. And then the defense, I have actually a lot less worries about the defense with Mike Tressel at DC, with Luke Fickell in tow. I mean, 72% of their tackles and pressures returned. So I think that is bankable. And then when you look at the East schedule, Rutgers and Indiana, completely manageable, right? You do have to play Ohio State. That's kind of a notch. I think if you were going to go against Wisconsin in this division, you would point to that. But I'm telling you, stuff from like a roster talent perspective, it's there. Does the schemes fit? And when I mention that, and we talk about running and your conditioning, maybe conditioning catches on to Wisconsin in the fourth quarter against Buffalo, Washington State, and Georgia Southern. And then maybe by the time they run into Purdue, they're running 100 plays a game and they have no problem running 100 plays a game. That just wasn't Wisconsin football before. So I get a little, like, I could see first half overs being played against Buffalo, first half over being played against Washington State until they get their legs in them. But I just can't buy a division future with this much change going on in the background. And that stinks because this is probably the most talented roster. So this will be the biggest tempo change that you see. I do like the over 8.5. It is juiced. I project them 9.1. So I would look that way with Wisconsin. I mean, and then there's just, I don't know what team we want to dive into here, but you're right. Illinois is going to miss Walters on the defensive side of the ball. Brett Bielema now has got to recover. They finished outside the top 100 in offensive finishing drives. Barry Lunny comes in, a quarterback I used to go against in high school. Barry Lunny Jr. comes in to run the offense. You're going to see some inside zone and counter. Altmaier he's ahead of Paddock after the spring game. This might be the best defensive line in the Big Ten, but there are massive losses at running back and secondary. Big holes there that are going to be tough to fill, especially with the offense that they were running with Barry Lunny. And the defense that you're going to need if Wisconsin decides they're going to start airing it out on every play and you got questions in the secondary.
And they need to find a way to get pressure because they could not do that at all last year.
Yeah. And the trench, this isn't a Brett Bielema trench that we're used to. We're used to that trench being just, there was a game where they manhandled Penn State and they've given Michigan problems in the past, but now this offensive line and defensive line are not expected to be within the top 4 of the entire conference. So I have problems with them. I do make it 7.3. I'm going to pass. I'm not going to take anything on the over here, but I don't think Illinois completely falls off the table, but they could. And then we come to Iowa and man, am I reading this number correctly out there? Under 8 plus 125. I mean, how does this Iowa team get to 9 wins? It's really hard. I mean, between Cade McNamara is coming in from the portal for Michigan. He's going to be under Brian Ferentz's system, but there's not going to be a change to the 12 in the inside zone, the outside zone. They like to run a lot of inside zone with 8 in the box. They're going to load the box. They got, a new tight end. the Iowa offense is not going to change, even though they have better players maybe at the quarterback position they've had in years. They get 74% of their offensive line snaps back. Special teams are not going to die off whatsoever. The problem with them in the schedule, they do have Penn State on the schedule. So, Wisconsin has Ohio State, Iowa has Penn State. This is a team that finished number one top coverage defense in all of the nation last year. Don't expect to drop off there. But on the offensive side, they finished 130th in pass blocking. And if Cade McNamara is going to make a difference, it's not going to be with a whole bunch of guys on his back. So, I don't know how. Do you see I mean, I don't know what you have Iowa at. I have them at 7 wins. This under 8 juiced, to the over. Really? I was going to win 9 games on this schedule?
Yeah, but you can get, I think at BetMGM there, you can get under 8.5 juiced. I mean, what I will say with Iowa is, like, you can always trust their defense is going to be good, and I do think their offense is going to be better. McCarthy's better, the offensive line should be better. That in of itself should help. And look, they're going to steal a couple games if that's the case, because they're the best punter in the country. Their special teams will be elite. Like, if you look at their schedule, like the 2 teams that won the lottery, I would say Wisconsin, definitely. I agree on Wisconsin, the over. I do have questions about like the scheme fit, but it's over or nothing there for me from a numbers perspective. They draw, they host Ohio State, and then they're at Indiana and Rutgers from the East. That's a win. They also host Iowa. That's huge. Iowa does go to Penn State, but they get Rutgers and Michigan State at home from the East. They also avoid Michigan and Ohio State. If you look at Iowa's schedule, it's they have a great home field advantage. If they take care of business at home, they're going to win 8 games. And let's see, they have their home. These are their home games: Utah State, Western Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Minnesota. Northwestern is in Chicago. Oh, who cares where that's played? Rutgers and Illinois. That could be 8 wins. And then I was thinking about the under 2, just from a numbers perspective. But that point, in addition, now they do go to Nebraska late in the finale, which is a bad thing for them because Nebraska's in a rebuild, and then it's the final game of the year.
Right.
What really took me off the Iowa under, because I was looking that way, is in week 2, in a little revenge spot, they play at Iowa State. And Iowa State, I don't know. We're gonna do Big 12 next. The rumors are Hunter Deckers is off the team.
Yep.
And we'll see who else. It doesn't sound good from just we'll get to that in the Big 12 episode. So if that at Iowa State game, and Iowa's historically owned that rivalry, they get that win. And then they just, they're with that home schedule. Because they're going to lose at Penn State. They're going to lose. We'll give them a loss at Wisconsin. And but the schedule is pretty manageable outside of that. So yeah, that Iowa State factor. And then what happened with Northwestern, Iowa really benefited from those 2 teams and the turmoil. And that they're going to just steal a game or 2. And I think the offensive line will be better. So I'm not betting the over. Was looking at the under, but after deep diving, I'm staying away.
Let me ask you a question, then I'll pivot to Nebraska. Are you ready for the first college football playoff ranking to come out on Halloween, and Iowa be like 7th or 8th, and everybody talk about how they're undefeated? Are you ready for that, to hear about how they're a national title contender? It's coming. There's
that better not happen, because that means they would have to win at Penn State.
Right. Yeah.
That better not happen.
Right.
But yeah, Iowa. I mean, Iowa's gonna, if they win at Iowa State, Western Michigan. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna be back in the conversation. But let's transition to Nebraska. Matt Rule, the turnaround artist. Usually in previous spots that he's been, it's been a complete mess, right? And not saying Nebraska isn't, but it's much more dire relative to the rest of the division. Like, could Matt Rule it's a complete change here. I mean, like, you have a brand new staff. It's going to be like an old school offense with like the fullback or established. They want to be like old school Nebraska, which I like. I think that this is something that Nebraska can kind of hang their hat on as their identity. I think the special teams will be fixed this year, which has been a disaster. And Matt Rule is good at can really fix like a lot of the in-game basic shit. So maybe they can start to win the close games, which they've been unable to do just for a couple, just fixing a little things in this division, which is chaotic and really gettable. I will say that they have a fairly easy non-con, but it's just like it's like you could see it going. I mean, like Northern Illinois at home, they're at Colorado and like Colorado hype spot. Louisiana Tech at home should be a win. They do draw Michigan, Maryland, Michigan State from the East, and they have to go to Minnesota and Wisconsin while they host Iowa. But they're on the road. They also go to Illinois. So they're on the road for 3 of the top 4 in the West. What do you see with Rule and this Nebraska team? Over 6.5. It is juiced to the under. Seems a little aggressive for this new regime, but maybe Jeff Sims, the mobile quarterback from Georgia Tech, who looks like he will be under center, can have some juice here for Rule and company. What do you see with Horn?
I think it's extremely aggressive. I mean, not only did you get Jeff Sims from the portal, you went and got Billy Kemp at wide receiver from Virginia. So that is your 1-2 punch that you're going to have on the offense, where the portal is trying to rebuild that side of the ball for Marcus Satterfield, who likes to run a lot of RPO, a lot of 11-10 inside zone. The Jeff Sims is going to be able to eat up there. Marcus Satterfield previously was on staff at Temple and Baylor, so he's going to fit what Matt Rule wants to do. On the defensive side of the ball, you're going to get Tony White. He had a 31%. Yeah, he had a 31% blitz rate at Syracuse. He can provide a pretty complicated coverage scheme and 3-3-5 front for to show some problems. There are issues on both sides. Last year, Nebraska was 128th in pass blocking. That plays into Jeff Sims' mobility. On the defensive side, they were 116th in havoc. They just could not play behind the line of scrimmage or pick off a ball. So I project this at 6. And so the number in the market is 6 with plus money to the under. I'm going off script. Like usually I'm so mathematical based in taking things. I will pass if the number is about the same. I'm taking the under here. First off, I don't see this schedule getting to 7 wins. Second off, Matt Rule is 3-21 in his first seasons at Temple and Baylor. Why? He is more about his program, his system, his structure, doesn't care about results in the first year. He never has. Doesn't care about results in the third year. He sells his AD on what his vision is, the way that he wants to go about it, and establishing a culture. And he's not going to come in and say, well, this is the pieces I have on my roster, and this is the offense and defense that I'm going to run. Matt Rule is one of the ones that doesn't do that. If they got to 7 wins, I'd be amazed. So I'm taking the under just based alone. I can't see them winning 7 at all. So at worst, I push. If they make a bowl, I mean, Matt Rule should be up for coach of the year if this team makes a bowl. But the fact that they are implementing all these schemes and they are not tailoring it to the players on staff, I'm going under here.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I don't hate the under. You can also get under 6.5, juice pretty heavy at MGM. People always ask about, do I prefer like an under 6 or, under 6 plus money or an under 6.5 minus, generally speaking, you're going to be like 60, 70 cents for a half win, but not all teams are created equal. It depends on the distribution of wins. And like, is it, if I project a team that say 5.8 wins, but there's a lot of like 100% win, 100% games, like close to 100%, and then close to 0%. And then there's like 2 or 3 coin flips compared to like, if there's a ton of coin flips, then in the former, I'm going to be more willing to pay for that half win then. So it really depends on the distribution. In this case,
and if you have a hedge spot, there's no hedge spot in the last 3 weeks against Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Yeah, the one thing I will say with Nebraska, if I don't mind the under at all, the kind of the case for them to appease my friends in Lincoln and surrounding areas, you have White comes in going to implement a 3-3-5. I like their corners are the strength of the defense.
Mm-hmm.
If they, if he can scheme pressure, which he has done in the past, and the young defensive line comes together, transfer pieces fit in, you have the corners. The D has some promise, and then the offense with Sims and the offensive line, which has been so disappointing, but maybe they can stay healthy. You had a center from the transfer portal who maybe hits. And then with Rule, you get, fixed. I think the special teams are a lot better now, which has been a problem for them. You get better just discipline, in-game decisions, the little things. And you win the close games that you've been losing. You fix the turnover problem as well. In a division with all of this change and new quarterbacks and new schemes where it's just chaos, if you are a Nebraska believer, instead of the win total over, bet on the chaos, bet on those things, and then take a shot at 18-1, 6 to win the division.
Yep.
Bet on the upside. It's not only just the upside of Nebraska, it's really just the chaos of the division. Like Wisconsin, this complete identity change, right? Iowa obviously could be a mess, as always. Who knows? They could lose to anybody in any week. So, Illinois with all their defensive losses, it's a messy division. So that's how I would attack Nebraska. Anything on Purdue? Hudson Card coming in, new head coach Ryan Walters. Loved him as the defensive coordinator for Illinois. Anything there with Purdue?
I mean, I do project it as 6, although I usually have problems with defensive coordinators taking over as head coaches, especially in year one. But Graham Harrell does come in. He's going to bring the air raid. He's going to bring some little bit of outside zone when they do decide to run. He had 32% RPO at West Virginia last year, but I think that was more of West Virginia's identity, the fact that they like to run the ball. We'll get to that in the Big 12 section. The defense for Walters returns 50% of their tackles and pressures, but this schedule includes Ohio State and Michigan. So Hudson Card, he's going to be asked to run this power raid that Graham Harrell wants to go. So to me, it's more of an unknown if Hudson Card has the ability to do this, because he didn't have the ability to take over the quarterback position with some really shoddy play at Texas. There's a bottom 5 unit here, in all of the Big 10 at every position. So it's not a team I want to get into. My number says it's 6. I should probably play the over 5.5, but they are going to be a pass for me. Along with Minnesota, they're also a pass. I project them 6.9, win total at 7. I'm not going to get into, we know what they want to do. But there are going to be, new wide receiver weapons for their Greek quarterback. And, I think that's going to have time to work itself. But they also play Michigan, Ohio State. So schedule is not real forgiving there either. So no play on Minnesota either.
Yeah. What I'll say with Purdue is, you have new defensive coordinator. It's going to be a lot of Walters stuff. So you're transitioning to a 3-4 with basically 5 down D linemen. You're going to have your edges on the line of scrimmage. They have a brand new defensive line. They need transfers to hit here. I like their linebackers, their safeties, but they need to replace 2 corners. So they need transfers to hit there as well. They also lost a really good kicker. There's a lot of change here. New schemes on offense and defense, and basically, so it's good that that's happening in the division with a lot of change. But when you have that much change, you really want to have kind of some cupcakes early on, and that's not the case. So with Purdue, BetMGM over 5 minus 120 you can find, but I think you can probably find a way to play them in the first couple of weeks if you have an opinion, because I assume. And you're right. They go to Iowa. They have Wisconsin in the 4th week, which isn't great. Or maybe you get them at turmoil. Who knows? But then they also get Ohio State, and they're at Michigan, and then they're at Nebraska in between those 2 games.
Right.
But they're non-con. Fresno State at home. Depends on how everything's going. At Vatech, right, and then at home against Syracuse. That's when their win total is going to be decided.
It's not a murderer's row of offense. It's considering what Fresno's going through with personnel changes.
Yeah. So, I agree with you on Purdue. It's I'm going to look to play them on a week-to-week basis. And in regards to Minnesota, was potentially going to look at an under, but after adjusting some other teams, I passed, but yeah, their schedule is brutal. Lose a lot on defense, especially on the back end at corner. So that really could dip. You would hope that the passing game does get better, even though they lost Morgan. All right, so that'll anything Northwestern, by the way. Northwestern is so we'll close with them for Mr. Darren Ravel. It is so their win total's down to 3, I think. It was off the board, and so I mean 3 flat. They get it's for me. It's I mean there was a ton of signs that say positive regression. It's like a terrible year for Fitzgerald, and he always just seems to bounce back somehow. But and they were like 1-5 in one possession games last year. They were 130th in turnover margin. But then like all this happens in the offseason. There's a quarterback competition, probably be Ben Bryant. They don't return a ton. They have one returning offensive line starter who's coming back from knee surgery. Lost their top 3 pass catchers. New defensive coordinator takes over D. That was awful. Questions at defensive tackle and cornerback. Their special teams are dicey. They draw Penn State, Rutgers, Maryland out of the East. They also play 3 straight Big Ten opponents that are coming off of a bye, which isn't great. You say to yourself, how does this Northwestern team get the 4 wins? I mean, like at Rutgers, week 1, I guess it's winnable. I don't think they're winning that game. UTEP at home, Minnesota at home, Penn State at home, Howard at home. You buy at Nebraska, Maryland at home, Iowa and Chicago. Maybe they beat Iowa like 9-7. Purdue at home. Like I don't know. How does this team get the 4 wins?
Yeah. So I think I've purposely not said anything about Northwestern with all this going on, because the word in the locker room was there was going to be a mass exodus to the portal if David Braun was not named the interim head coach. He was brought over from North Dakota State. He was there for 3 years as the defensive coordinator. We know that is the top team in FCS. He was named the top coordinator in all of FCS in 2021. This was an amazing hire for Northwestern to go out and get David Braun to pick up a defense that was near dead last in success rate, 100th in defensive finishing drives, and created no havoc whatsoever. So if the sentiment out of the locker room was, we're all hitting the portal if you don't make our DC, our new DC, who's only been there a couple of months, this poor guy accepts a job and dealing with this shit, has to go up to media days, and his AD's not even there. Anyways, he's not being paid enough. I don't know what David Braun's salary is, but you're not being paid enough, my friend. So if the players in the locker room are committed to their interim head coach DC and all said, we're going to hit the portal if he's not named the head coach, that means they're staying, and that means they're playing with an agenda. It's not one of these, Michigan State things where they just fall off the map. These guys seem fired up to play for David Braun. So I think what I want to do is let this come down to 3.
Are you going to bet the over in Northwestern?
I think I am. If there's a 2.5, I'm going to play it. If it's 3 flat, I'll think about it. But we see this all the time. Head coach gets fired. Players are pissed off. They want one certain guy to be the interim. That guy gets named the interim, and then they play their asses off the entire season. I don't think Northwestern is world beaters at all. I think they're going to struggle to even win a game, say Howard and UTEP. But at the same time, it's not going to be because of a lack of motivation or ambition or whatever this roster wants, because they got the guy that they wanted to be interim head coach.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a valuable dog at times. I like Rutgers. We'll transition into our 3 now. I like the Rutgers over. I'm scared of that week 1 game at home. I think Rutgers is going to win. I'm pretty confident, but it's like everyone writes off Northwestern, all the shit, and then they go on the road and it's just like, fuck you to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm petrified of that. They have then UTEP at home, so they could jump out the 2-0, and you're Howard at home. So yeah, it's definitely doable. I'm not playing the under, but I won't be joining you on over 3. Maybe if it goes to 2.5, if the hate continues, I could get there, but not at 3. All right, good stuff on the Big Ten, the always ultra competitive East, and the truly wild, wild West in the last year of divisions in the Big Ten before they expand to 16 teams next season. Before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. All right, let's start with first down, and let's talk week 1 or week 0. Week 0, week 1. We'll do this for every conference betting preview for the Power 5 conferences that Colin and I cover. A take, and if you don't have anything, you can always look at a game of the year line as well. But something for week 0 or week 1, Big Ten related, that has caught your eye.
I've been waiting for this podcast before I shove it in the app. I'm going to bet it and put it in the app right after we get done recording. I'm going to take Wisconsin minus 23.5 against a Buffalo team that has done nothing to address anything in the back seven when it comes to giving up explosive plays. Buffalo was dead last in standard downs explosives. They weren't very good against pass EPA. This is a MAC defense with a bunch of small new faces in the secondary, and Wisconsin is coming out for a show with this new offense. Tanner Mordecai, wide receivers, Braylon Allen getting holes that you can drive trucks through. Buffalo is not going to be a real test for Wisconsin. I think Luke Fickell will want to make a name for himself. I power rate this game 27.5. I expect it to close at 28. So right now, a month before kick, I'm going to take Wisconsin minus 23.5 against a very, very poor secondary back seven of Buffalo and an offense that is not going to be able to get anywhere against a legit Wisconsin defense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just one of those games where, look, the Buffalo defense, I'll have my MAC manifesto and MAC preview, should get absolutely shredded here. And it's a showcase game. Luke Fickell, in his first game as head coach with this brand new offense, let's get, Camp Randall excited. Let's get the fans excited and run this up, which they should be able to do. Don't mind first half throwing in that in there as well. Yeah, I had that game circled. We were on the same page this entire podcast. I'm scrambling right now.
Did not share notes, everybody. I promise we did not share notes.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if there's anything else that I had circled. I was out in Vegas this past weekend. I watched all the Michigan 35s get picked off. East Carolina took money. That's down to 34 off the key number of 35. I was going from 21 to 23. The total's gone from 48 to 43. You don't see that every day.
I did have some interest in Central Michigan, but I didn't believe enough that they could take advantage of Michigan State's defense. Plus, Mel Tucker really kills directional schools, so I laid off of that. That was on the radar, though.
Yeah, nothing else for me. So I agree. I'll co-sign Wisconsin. We'll obviously break down the other games on our week 0, week 1 betting previews. But let's move on to second down, and that is our favorite under. I think you just made a natural transition talking about Michigan State. I think we are both going to agree here. So why don't you make a quick case? I'll add anything on.
For my under, I'm going to take Nebraska under 6 plus 130. I do project this at 6. No path on the schedule for them to get to 7 wins. This culture is more about establishing a foundation, a lifestyle, team chemistry. That's what Matt Rule is all about. That's how he has built Temple and Baylor in years past. His record at Temple and Baylor first year, 3-21. Does not care about wins, does not care about anything except establishing a culture. I hope Nebraska fans are able to be patient, allow Matt Rule to get this year, get his systems in place, get this new defensive offensive scheme going together, and allow him one more trip through the portal before they get all upset. But to say this again, I do project them at 6. It's mathematically not a bet. It is just a bet on the fact that Matt Rule has sold his AD on a vision that we are establishing a culture, and not the fact that I'm going to bend what I want to do just for wins in the first season. So I'm going under 6 on Nebraska.
Don't hate that at all. I'm going to go with an under that you also agree with, and that's Michigan State. I like the under 5.5 juiced, or if you want to go under 5 plus money, either or works. This is a brutal schedule. I mean, they're going to Iowa, to Rutgers. They have Michigan, at Ohio State, Penn State, only 3 true Big Ten home games. They even have to go to Indiana And to Rutgers, like I mentioned, the two worst teams in their division, and they're going to a rebuilding Indiana team at the end of the year. There's some tough spots in the schedule. They lost their quarterback after spring, their top two receivers, one in the NFL, the other after spring to the portal. The defense has been a mess, and they lose their two best D-backs. I don't see it really improving that much. Yes, the offensive line is more experienced, but it's been a mess. I just don't like where this program is headed. I do not see them getting the bowl eligibility. Going with Sparty under. I have a really loyal follower and listener, Testa, who's not going to be pleased with that. Sorry to all my friends in East Lansing. I took an RV out there one time to watch Kirk Cousins and beat Russell Wilson on a Hail Mary in the last play of the game. Electric game. One of my fondest college football memories as far as going to games. But I'm going with Michigan State under. Colin's going with Nebraska under. And for third down, it's either an over or a future. Colin, what do you got?
Well, I want to give everybody the Maryland over 7, and they have enough pieces at quarterback and at the wide receiver position to give a lot of defenses with bad secondaries trouble. And even though they have a tough schedule in the division that they're in, it's a win total that I project over the 7. So I like the plus money that goes along with this. They're going to be good enough to beat and win 8 games on this schedule. It is pretty soft outside of the big boys over in their division, but we're talking futures and we're talking the Big Ten. It's not Michigan. It's not Ohio State. It's Penn State. It is Penn State's time to finally answer the question if they're back. Similar to Texas, right? Well, Penn State is back this year. They're going to bring back the best defense in college football, the best secondary, the best linebackers, the best defensive line. Oh, by the way, they have 2 explosive playmakers at the running back position. Their offensive line is going to be fine. I trusted Mike Yurcich as the offensive coordinator to manage Drew Aller, who's coming off a season limited in dropbacks and passing attempts, but he didn't have any interceptions and no turnover-worthy plays. And that's pretty admirable as a freshman, even if it is mop-up time. I believe in Mike Yurcich, and Manny Diaz is a great coordinator, not so great of a head coach. We don't have to worry about that here as a defensive coordinator. This is a team I believe is going to get 1 of 2 against Michigan or Ohio State. 11-1, I think, is their floor. As long as James Franklin and clock management and bad decisions at fourth down don't take this out of our hands, Penn State plus 440 is out there to make the playoff. The lowest I would buy it is 4-1, and I am shopping all the way up until the season starts to get a better number.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't the year that Maryland finally bites Penn State, but I agree. I'm going to go take it one step further. Yes, we are back. I'm going for the whole shebang. 25-1, I think, is at BetMGM. Shop around as always. But look, the defense is there. It's the top 5 defense to me. I can confidently say that. It's all going to come down to Drew Aller, and then I want someone to step up as the guy at receiver. I like the upside there. That's what I'm buying, because if they do get to the college football playoff in the last year of this college football playoff for the first time, that means Aller reached or exceeded his expectations, and the ceiling is very high, and that means they can play with anybody in the country. And I much prefer buying that upside than a Big Ten future, because as we outlined earlier in the episode, there is a chance where in a tiebreaker, because they have Northwestern and Michigan and Ohio State doesn't, that they get left out and they lose that tiebreaker. But even if that happens, there's still a path, which we saw last year, where they could still make it to the college football playoff. I'm buying the upside on Penn State, which I think that there's just way too much value there when compared to Ohio State and Michigan. Similar questions with each of those offenses. Give me the Nittany Lions to win the national championship. Also like your play on getting to the college football playoff. All right, that'll do it for us. Wrapping up the Big Ten and the always interesting East Division and the Wild, Wild West. Thanks as always to Colin. Thanks to our audio and video teams on the back end. Thanks to all of you, of course, for tuning in. It's so good to be back. We're going to keep churning these out. We're about to record the Big 12, which will be fun next. Then we're going to continue with the Group of 5, SEC next week. So they're going to keep coming. Before you know it, week 0, week 1 will be here. Can't wait to sweat games with all of you. If you have a chance, please leave a review, a 5-star review. They really help us out, especially early in the season. We'll do a ton of giveaways leading up to the season. If you've already done one, just grab someone else's phone, your girlfriend, friends, moms, whoever, leave a 5-star review, say whatever, shit on me, Colin, for any of our picks, say what you think. As long as it's 5-star, those will help us out. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe. Thanks for tuning in as always. It's good to be back. We'll catch y'all next time. Cheers.
Peace out.